A reindeer was injured by barnacles and parasites. A rescue team successfully rescued the reindeer, but how the rescue team rescued the reindeer. Watch this video until the end. You will get complete information about the story. So, in the vast, snow-covered wilderness, where reindeer roam freely under the pale northern sky, one helpless creature stood alone, struggling against the biting cold. Its legs trembled with every step, its body weighed down by something unnatural, clusters of barnacles and relentless parasites clinging to its fur. Each movement was a battle, each breath a painful reminder of its fading strength. But how did a reindeer, a creature of the land, become covered in parasites usually found in the sea? And more importantly, could anyone reach it in time before it succumbed to exhaustion? This was no ordinary case. It was a race against time, a desperate struggle between survival and the unforgiving forces of nature. When the rescue team received the call, they had no idea what they were about to face. What they found left them stunned. Stay with us as we unravel this astonishing story of resilience, compassion, and a rescue mission that defied all odds. You won't believe what happened next. The rescue story began with an unusual sight in the frozen wilderness. A local wildlife observer, accustomed to watching reindeer roam freely across the icy plains, noticed something strange. While most of the herd moved effortlessly through the snow, one reindeer lagged behind, struggling to keep up. Its movements were slow, unsteady, almost painful to watch. At first it seemed like the animal was simply exhausted, perhaps weakened by hunger or the harsh winter conditions. But as the observer looked closer through binoculars, the reality was far worse. The reindeer's fur was covered in irregular, hardened patches, something unnatural, something that didn't belong. And then the most alarming detail became clear. Its skin was crawling. Parasites, clinging onto its weakened body, were draining its strength. The observer knew that this wasn't a common case of malnutrition or injury. This was something far more serious. How had these barnacle-like formations attached themselves to a land-dwelling animal? Could this be the result of contaminated water, a hidden danger in the ecosystem? More importantly, could the reindeer be saved? A distress call was sent out to a local wildlife rescue team. Time was against them. The reindeer's condition suggested that it had been suffering for days, perhaps weeks. With every passing hour, its chances of survival diminished. The team had to act fast. When the rescuers arrived, they expected to find a sick, weakened animal in need of care. But what they saw left them stunned. The reindeer was in even worse shape than they had imagined. It could barely move, its legs trembling with every attempt to walk. The barnacles and parasites had formed thick clusters, pulling at its skin, causing open sores and infections. It was as if the reindeer's body was being slowly consumed by these invaders. But the biggest challenge was yet to come. How would they capture a terrified, suffering animal without causing it even more distress? And once they had it, could they remove the parasites in time to save its life? What happened next was nothing short of extraordinary. The rescue team knew they had no time to waste. The reindeer's condition was deteriorating rapidly, and every passing moment increased the risk of infection, exhaustion, or even death. But capturing a wild animal, especially one in distress, was no easy task. One wrong move could send it into a panic, worsening its injuries or causing it to flee deeper into the wilderness, where it might never be found again. The first challenge was the terrain. Thick layers of snow covered the ground, making movement difficult for both the rescuers and the weakened reindeer. The wind howled through the icy plains, reducing visibility. The reindeer, though frail, still had the instincts of a wild animal. It wouldn't just stand still and allow itself to be captured. Approaching slowly, the team formed a semicircle around the animal, trying to avoid startling it. But as soon as they got closer, the reindeer reacted. Fear surged through its body, and with whatever strength it had left, it tried to escape. Its legs wobbled under its own weight, barely holding up against the relentless burden of parasites and barnacle-like growths. Every step it took was slow and agonizing, but survival instincts kept it moving. The team had to think fast. They couldn't risk chasing it too far. It might collapse from exhaustion. One rescuer carefully prepared a net, waiting for the right moment. Another held a tranquilizer dart, but using it was a last resort. If the dosage was too strong for the already weakened reindeer, it could go into shock. Then just as the team was about to make their move, something unexpected happened. The reindeer stumbled. Its front legs gave way, sending it crashing into the snow. For a brief moment, it lay there, breathing heavily, too weak to stand again. This was their chance. Rushing forward, the team carefully restrained the reindeer, ensuring it wouldn't injure itself in the process. Its body was cold to the touch, its fur damp and matted. Up close, the full extent of its suffering became even clearer. The barnacles had latched onto its skin in clusters, forming hard, crusted patches. Some were embedded so deeply that removing them could cause bleeding. The parasites burrowed into its fur, moved slightly, still feeding on their host. The rescuers exchanged concerned glances. This was worse than they had anticipated. Could they safely remove the parasites without causing more harm? Was the reindeer strong enough to endure the treatment? As they carefully loaded the animal onto a stretcher, one thing was certain. This rescue was far from over. The real battle was just beginning. Once the reindeer was safely transported to a wildlife rehabilitation center, the real challenge began. The rescuers had seen cases of malnutrition, frostbite, and even injuries caused by predators, but never something like this. How had a land-dwelling reindeer become covered in barnacle-like growths, something usually found on marine animals? And more importantly, could they remove them without putting the animal in even greater danger? The first step was a thorough examination. The veterinarians worked carefully, scanning the reindeer's body to assess the extent of the infestation. The barnacles were clustered around its legs, belly, and neck, their sharp edges cutting into the reindeer's skin with every movement. The parasites, small but relentless, had burrowed deep into the fur, draining the animal's strength day by day. But the biggest concern was infection. The wounds caused by the barnacles were already showing signs of inflammation. If bacteria had entered the bloodstream, the reindeer could develop life-threatening complications. Time was critical. The team decided to begin with hydration and pain management. The reindeer was given fluids and antibiotics to prevent infection. It lay still, too weak to resist, its eyes half closed from exhaustion. The team knew that removing the barnacles and parasites would be painful, but there was no other option. Carefully, they began the delicate process. Some of the barnacle-like growths were so deeply embedded that removing them would tear the skin. The team used warm saline solutions to soften the hardened shells, making them easier to detach. Inch by inch, they worked, ensuring that each removal did not cause unnecessary pain. Some barnacles came off easily, revealing raw red skin beneath. Others required surgical precision, as they had fused with the reindeer's body over time. As the hours passed, the reindeer twitched occasionally, flinching at the sensation. Despite the sedation, it could still feel the pressure, the discomfort of something foreign being stripped away. But it did not resist. It was as if the animal understood that these humans were trying to help. Finally, the last of the barnacles was removed. What remained was a body covered in healing wounds, patches of fur missing, and skin irritated from months of infestation. The parasites were extracted one by one, ensuring that none remained to continue feeding off the reindeer's weakened state. But the battle wasn't over yet. The reindeer needed time to heal. The next few days would be critical. Would its body regain strength? Would it be able to walk again without pain? And most importantly, would it ever be strong enough to return to the wild? No one knew for sure. But one thing was certain. This reindeer had been given a second chance. And what happened next would surprise everyone. With the barnacles and parasites finally removed, the real test began. The reindeer had survived the first stage of its rescue, but it was still dangerously weak. Months of infestation had drained its strength, leaving its muscles frail and its body covered in raw, sensitive wounds. The team knew that healing would take time, but the question remained. Was the reindeer strong enough to fight for its survival? The first 24 hours were crucial. The reindeer was placed in a quiet, temperature-controlled enclosure, away from stress and predators. A thick layer of hay was spread on the ground, providing warmth and comfort for the exhausted animal. But it barely moved. It lay motionless, its breathing shallow, as if unsure whether it had the strength to keep going. To help it recover, the veterinarians administered fluids, antibiotics, and pain relief. The open wounds left behind by the barnacles were carefully treated with antiseptics to prevent infection. Every few hours, a caretaker gently checked on the reindeer, monitoring its pulse and temperature, hoping for any sign of improvement. By the second day, there was a small breakthrough. The reindeer, though weak, lifted its head. Its eyes, once dulled by exhaustion, showed the faintest glimmer of awareness. Encouraged by this progress, the team introduced small portions of nutrient-rich food, fresh moss, lichen, and grains designed to restore its energy levels. At first, the reindeer refused to eat, but after some coaxing, it finally took its first few hesitant bites. Days turned into weeks, and little by little, the reindeer showed signs of improvement. Its movements became steadier, its appetite stronger. The wounds on its body began to close, and patches of new fur started growing over the damaged skin. But then, an unexpected challenge arose. When the team attempted to help the reindeer stand, it struggled. Its legs trembled under its own weight, as if they had forgotten how to support its body. Had the months of suffering left permanent damage? Would it ever walk properly again? The team refused to give up. They introduced gentle physical therapy, encouraging the reindeer to take small steps each day. It was a slow, painstaking process, but the animal fought through it. And then, after weeks of uncertainty, something incredible happened. One morning, as the caretakers arrived, they found the reindeer standing on its own, not struggling, not collapsing, standing tall, strong, and alert. It took a few cautious steps forward, its hooves pressing firmly into the ground. It was as if, for the first time in a long while, the reindeer had remembered what it meant to be free. But there was one final test ahead, the moment that would determine its fate. Would it be able to return to the wild? And more importantly, would its herd accept it back? The team could only hope as they prepared for the most emotional part of the journey, releasing the reindeer back home. What happened next would be a moment no one would ever forget. After weeks of intensive care, the reindeer had made an astonishing recovery. It had regained its strength, its wounds had healed, and its once dull eyes now held a spark of life. But the most important question remained. Was it ready to return to the wild? The team had done everything they could, but nature had to decide the rest. Releasing an animal back into its natural habitat was always a delicate process. Would it remember how to survive on its own? Could it find food, avoid predators? And most importantly, would its herd accept it after so much time apart? The release site was carefully chosen, not far from where the reindeer had originally been found. The team hoped that its herd was still in the area, grazing along the vast, snow-covered plains. The transport crate was loaded onto a truck, and after a long journey through icy roads and frozen forests, they finally arrived at the edge of the wilderness. As the crate was carefully opened, there was a moment of hesitation. The reindeer stood still, ears twitching, nostrils flaring as it took in the cold, crisp air. It was free to go, but would it? Then in a sudden burst of energy, it stepped forward, slowly at first testing the ground beneath its hooves. Then with growing confidence, it moved faster until it was trotting through the snow, its body no longer burdened by parasites and pain. The rescue team watched in awe, but their job wasn't over yet. They needed to make sure the reindeer could find its herd. For hours, they monitored from a distance, hoping for a sign. And then, just as the sun began to dip behind the mountains, it happened. A group of reindeer appeared on the horizon, their silhouettes moving gracefully against the fading light. The rescued reindeer stopped, lifted its head, and let out a low, familiar call. Would they accept it back? The tension was almost unbearable. And then, one of the herd members responded. Slowly, the group moved closer, circling the lone reindeer, sniffing and nudging it as if recognizing a lost family member. Then, in a moment of quiet acceptance, they continued their journey together, disappearing into the vast wilderness. The rescue team stood in silence, watching until the last trace of the herd vanished. The mission was complete, Against all odds, this reindeer had been given a second chance at life. But the story didn't just end here. It carried a deeper message. How many other animals were silently suffering, waiting for someone to intervene? How many more cases like this would go unnoticed? Wildlife faces countless threats, some natural, some caused by human impact. This rescue was a reminder that every life, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem, deserves a fighting chance. As the team packed their equipment and prepared to leave, one thought remained. Somewhere out there, in the vast, untamed wilderness, a once helpless reindeer was running free again. And that, in the end, was all that truly mattered. The reindeer's remarkable journey from suffering to freedom is a powerful reminder of the resilience of nature and the impact of compassion. Thanks to the dedicated rescue team, this once helpless animal was given a second chance at life. But it also highlights a broader message: our responsibility to protect and preserve wildlife, to step in when needed, and to ensure that no creature is left behind. As we reflect on this incredible story, let it inspire us all to take action, support conservation efforts, and always remember that even the smallest acts of kindness can make a world of difference.